Hi, this is Cindy from Vintage to New. Today we're going to talk about how to sew gathers. Once you learn a couple little tricks, find out how to set your machine up and how to evenly distribute the gathers, it's really easy. So without delay, let's get started right away learning how to sew gathers. So today we're going to be learning about how to do gathers. So let's get started with how we run a gathering stitch. You need to know your machine. Somewhere on your machine you can change the length of your stitches. You want to put it to the longest length of a stitch that your machine can do. Mine, I'm going to turn it up here to the longest length, and here we go. So you do not back stitch, you just sew. So I am going to be doing this at approximately 1/4 inch, and I just start sewing, and it's taking really big stitches, really long length. You just go nice and slow, going down the edge of your fabric. Alright, so I have reached the other end. You still don't back stitch. Pull it out, leave a nice long tail. You can gather with just one stitch. I do it all the time. But if you're a beginner, or if your fabric is a little heavier, do 2 rows of stitches. Do one right next to the other, and you could do the other one at like 1/8 of an inch, but don't go off the edge of your fabric. I'm not allowing my stitches to cross over each other, and I'm not allowing them to go off the edge of the fabric. Here I am to the other end, so I'm going to leave myself a tail. So you can see that there are 2 rows of stitches right across the top of this, and this is going to be an apron. Let's say you were doing something like the skirt on a dress. You would know that you have a center front and a center back and 2 side seams. So you know that there's going to be 4 areas that those ruffles, that gather needs to go to. On this one, I only need to find the center. So I'm going to take a pin, and I'm going to put my pin right here in the center, so I always know that I have this many places to gather on. I have this much to gather on this side, this much to gather on this side. This is the waistband to my apron, and we're going to be gathering it to just this center piece right here. This is the ties that go down the outside. So this is my piece that I'm going to gather to, and it only has a center. We don't have 4 places. So I'm going to find the center and put a pin in it. So now I'm going to take this, and I'm going to match up pin to pin. Right there is the center of the waistband, and here's the center of the fabric, and I'm going to pin it into place. And I'm not pinning through the stitches, and I'm taking that pin out. So now all I need to do is go over here to where my stitches are, pulling just the bobbin threads. You're just going to pull this up, and I already know that this is the center, and this is going to be the edge of where I want this to be. So I know I only have to gather this much. Alright, and so I gather until this matches the size of this. And if I was doing this, this was my side seam and I still had to go from here to the back, you would do it exactly the same. You would just match each area that needs to have gathers and make sure it's the right size. So there's the right size. And I'm going to put a pin in it right there. And now I'm going to take some time and make sure that these gathers are nice and even. Because see, right now I have a great big bunch of gathers here, and there's none over here, and there's very few here in the center. So I'm going to take some time and move these around so that they're nice and even. See, there's a big bunch. This is gathered at 1.5 times the width of the fabric, so it's not a lot of gathers. Sometimes you go up to 2.5 times, and that's a lot of gathers. And so it just depends on what your pattern is telling you to do. So there is a very nicely spread out, and as I get them even, I'm going to pin it. All right, and I'm going to pull this up just a little bit more right here at the end. And so there's my gather. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and I know that I'll have the same amount of gathers on this side because we matched the center points. Okay, so we're ready to sew this on to our waistband. So I need to change my stitch length back to your normal stitch length that you use when you sew. I sewed this on at 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 inch. I'm going to sew it on at 3/8 of an inch. Now, you don't want to run over your pins because it can be bad for your machine. But also, if you'll notice, it has some of the gathers kind of in here a little bit crooked. So pull your pins out and use something. This is just a little awl that I have. You can use like the small screwdriver that came with your sewing machine, or just something to help you spread these out as you're sewing and keep your gathers really straight. You want them straight this way. You don't want them bunched under like that. When you're, see how it's kind of bunched under right there? And if you sew over that, it's not going to be a good gather. So you want it to be nice and even and straight. And then you just sew it down. Now, this at 1.5 times the width is not a lot of gathers, and it's much easier to sew. When you get up to really frilly little girls' dresses or something like that, this is when this becomes really handy to have as you try to keep your gathers nice and straight. So you just keep working it, making sure those gathers go down nice and straight. They're not bunched under. And you just keep going, and as you come up to your pins, you take them out. And see how that's kind of folded under right there? I want to get that nice and opened up. And sew it down. So you just finish sewing all the way across. So here is our apron with really nicely done gathers all the way across. If you would like to see how to make this apron, check out this video up here. Otherwise, this is how you sew on gathers. And you always sew your gathering stitches and this stitch here so that it's covered up, final finish. So I hope this was a helpful video for you. So until next time, this was Cindy from Vintage to New.